There's a kind of quiet that only exists in a happy home. The clinking of spoons at dinner, the gentle hum of children laughing in the next room, the steady rhythm of someone you love breathing beside you at night. For Clara, that quiet was everything. She had built her life around it, around her husband, Ethan, their two children, and the woman who had become like a second mother, Ethan's mom, Rose. They weren't perfect, but they were close. Clara had given her whole self to this family. She cooked with care. She laughed freely. She poured love into the little things because that's where real life lives. She believed in love. She believed in Ethan. She didn't know that Ethan's love was no longer hers. It was a Tuesday evening. The house smelled like Clara's famous lentil stew. "Come on, everyone," she called from the kitchen, "dinner's ready." Rose walked in first. "You should have let me help, Clara." "Why would I do that?" Clara smiled. "This is my domain, you sit down and enjoy." Her daughter Lily and son Miles ran in giggling. "Mom," Lily pouted, "I don't feel like stew today." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Well, what does my daughter feel like?" "Pasta." He laughed. "All right, pasta it is." Clara blinked. "But I made all this." "It won't go to waste," Ethan said, grabbing his keys. "I'll have it for lunch tomorrow." Everyone cheered. Clara smiled faintly. It was just pasta, just one dinner, just a change of plan. But in her heart, something small cracked. At work, Ethan wore a different face. The face of a man in love, but not with Clara. For over 2 years, he had been in a secret relationship with his assistant, Sophie, smart, charming, and dangerously understanding. "How long will we keep hiding?" Sophie asked one night, her voice low. Ethan sighed. "You know the truth, I have a family, 2 kids." "I knew since day one," she said, "but I've waited. Don't I deserve more than this?" "I just need time. My mom loves Clara. I can't spring this on her." "She's your wife, Ethan, but I'm the one you love." And he didn't deny it because he believed it. Clara's birthday was coming. "Are you getting her anything special?" Rose asked her son. "I always do," Ethan replied, smiling. "But you know Clara, she always says she doesn't want anything." "Get her a ring," Rose said, "a gold one. She'll never say it, but she'll love it." So Ethan did. He walked into a jewelry store and picked out a beautiful gold ring for Clara, and another one more elegant, more expensive for Sophie. Because love to him had become something you could separate. Wife, mother of your children, and then the woman who stole your heart. But hearts aren't meant to be stolen, not when they were already given. Clara and Rose stopped by the same jewelry store the next day. They were getting bracelets made for Lily's birthday. The owner greeted them warmly. "Welcome back, James. Ethan said he'd come by in the evening to pick up the rings." "Rings?" Clara asked. "Oh no," the owner chuckled. "I ruined the surprise. He got 2 rings made for your birthday." "2?" Clara froze. Rose looked confused. "Maybe he's planning something," Clara said quietly. "Let's not ruin it." They decided to hide in the back room and surprise him. But it was Clara who got the surprise, because Ethan didn't come alone. He walked in with Sophie. He smiled at her, held out a ring. "This one's for you," he said. "It's beautiful, just like you." Clara stood behind the curtain. She didn't cry, not yet, but something inside her went silent. At home that night, the silence didn't last. Rose confronted Ethan. "What is going on?" Sophie tried to speak, but Rose silenced her with a glare. "I'm talking to my son." Ethan's voice trembled. "I love Sophie. I want to be with her." "What about Clara?" Rose asked. "She's a good woman." "But I never loved her. Dad arranged our marriage. I went along with it." "And your kids?" "They can stay with Clara. I'll provide everything." Sophie added softly, Clara can still live here, I don't mind. Rose stared in disbelief. You want two wives in one house? Ethan nodded, it's the only way. Clara listened from the hallway, and she knew in that moment she was no longer a wife, she was just in the way. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, wrapped in silence, her hands curled around a cold cup of tea she never drank. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, her thoughts raged like a storm. She had always believed that if she loved hard enough, stayed loyal long enough, and gave without question, she would never be replaced. But the truth had arrived, uninvited and sharp, and it had no room for fairness. She didn't cry. Not yet, she didn't scream. She just listened to the sound of her own breathing. That and the muffled laughter of her children sleeping in the next room. That night, Ethan didn't try to speak to her. He walked past her like a guest in someone else's home. Maybe he didn't know what to say, maybe he didn't care. But Clara sat still, and for the first time in years, she didn't reach out to him, not even in her mind. The next morning, she prepared breakfast as usual: toast, warm milk, fruits. Ethan wasn't at the table, but the children were, and so was Rose. Clara smiled, not out of habit, but for her children. She poured the milk, buttered the bread, and asked Lily how her project was going. It was the kind of smile you wear not because you're okay, but because someone else needs you to be. When Ethan finally appeared, he barely met her eyes. He mumbled something about going to work. Clara nodded and said nothing, but Rose watched him closely. And then she watched Clara. There was something in her daughter-in-law's quiet, something that felt stronger than anger. 2 days later, Sophie moved into the house. She tried to be cheerful, helpful, friendly, even. She cooked a meal that was far too spicy for the children. She forgot the yogurt. Rose couldn't eat. Lily cried. And Clara stood up from her chair, went to the fridge, and brought out the bowl of yogurt she had made quietly, as she always did. Without a word, she served it to her children and to Rose. Then she sat back down and ate in silence. Ethan didn't say a thing either, but his eyes lingered on her longer than they had in weeks. Sophie, meanwhile, looked at her reflection in a glass and smiled, unaware that love built on betrayal rarely survives the weight of ordinary life. Days passed. Clara continued doing what she always did, caring, listening, holding the home together with her hands and her silence. And Ethan began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: regret, not loud, not immediate, but quiet, creeping, and constant. It was the day of Miles' school performance when the shift became impossible to ignore. Clara had already left for the school. She had packed extra snacks, dressed Miles with care, and kissed his forehead before he ran off backstage. He was playing a tree, a simple role, but to Clara it was everything. Ethan had promised to go, but Sophie had other plans. I got us movie tickets, she said, holding them up excitedly. But Miles has his performance today, Ethan replied. So, he's just standing on a stage like a tree, that's hardly important. Ethan turned to her slowly. It's important to him. Sophie laughed. You're kidding, right? He won't even notice you're not there. Clara's already gone anyway. He didn't shout, he didn't argue, he just grabbed his coat. I'm his father, he said, and I will be there. Sophie watched him leave with disbelief. That night, she didn't return home until 1 a.m. No explanation. No apology. When she walked in, Rose was still awake. So now we wait up for grown women coming home from parties? Rose asked dryly. Sophie rolled her eyes. Don't start, I'm not a teenager. Rose stood slowly. No, you're not, but you're also not a wife. Ethan entered the room a moment later, watching the tension build. Sophie turned to him. You don't even care I came home late, you're still obsessed with Clara. And your kids, maybe you should have just stayed with them. Ethan didn't raise his voice, but something inside him broke open. I needed a wife, a partner. Someone who understands what a home is, not just a house. Someone who loves without needing to be the center of everything. Sophie smirked. You mean someone like Clara, the woman who acts like your maid? Who has no self-respect? Don't say her name like that, Ethan snapped. For a moment the room was completely still. You want someone like Clara? Sophie asked coldly. Then go back to her. Because I will never be like her. I know, Ethan replied. That's exactly the problem. Sophie packed her things that same night, and Ethan didn't stop her. When she walked out the door, the house felt lighter. But the damage had already been done. Ethan sat in the kitchen long after midnight, staring at the same cup of tea Clara had once made for him every morning. She didn't make it anymore. He didn't blame her. She hadn't spoken to him since Sophie moved in. She cared for the children, spoke to Rose, carried herself with grace and silence. But her heart was no longer waiting for him. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to beg. But how do you ask forgiveness from the very person you broke? The next morning, as she was folding laundry, Clara felt his presence behind her. I'm sorry, he said. She didn't turn around. He stepped closer. I don't know how to make it right. She looked at him finally, and her eyes were calm. You can't make it right, she said, but you can promise me one thing. Anything. That no one will ever come between us and our children again. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I promise, not even if my own mother suggests it. From behind them, Rose spoke softly. If I hadn't suggested it, you might never have seen who truly loved you. Clara smiled gently. She understood now. Sometimes even betrayal has a purpose. It reveals what was real and what never was. Their son, Miles, came running in. Papa, are you gonna stay with us forever now? Ethan pulled him close. I will. Always. Clara didn't say she forgave him. She didn't need to, because her strength wasn't in her words. It was in her choice to stay only after choosing herself first. And slowly, with patience and effort, they began again. Not like before, but better, not perfect, but honest, and that was enough. Clara didn't expect healing to feel like this. She had always imagined healing as some powerful moment of strength, standing tall, making declarations, cutting ties. But it didn't come like thunder. It came quietly. It began in the small hours of the morning when she made tea only for herself, not because she was angry, not because she was trying to punish anyone, but because, for the first time in years, she wanted to sit with herself, just herself. She poured the tea into her favorite cup, the one with a tiny crack on the handle, and walked to the garden where the air still smelled like dew. She sat on the wooden bench, worn smooth by time, and breathed in the silence. She wasn't sure how long she stayed there, but she didn't need to be anywhere else. Later that morning, she packed the kids' lunches, helped Lily with her socks, reminded Miles not to forget his backpack, and waved them off with a kiss. Ethan offered to drive them, and she let him. Letting him take part didn't feel like surrender anymore. It felt like clarity. He was the children's father, that much was true, but Clara was her own again. That afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Blank pages stared back at her. She hadn't written anything for years, not since college. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up a pen. She wrote just one sentence. I forgot how to love myself. She stopped, breathed, then continued. And now I am remembering. Each word came like a drop of water into a dry well. She didn't write for anyone else, not for Ethan, not for Rose. not even for her children. She wrote for the version of herself she had left behind in all the loving and serving. She wrote for the girl who used to dream in color, who used to dance in the rain, who used to ask herself what she wanted, not just what others needed. She spent the next few weeks creating space for that girl to return. Sometimes that meant saying no. No to baking an extra cake for the school fundraiser. No to pretending she was okay when she wasn't. No to being the glue that held everything together while no one asked if she was breaking. Other times it meant saying yes. Yes to quiet walks by the lake. Yes to eating alone without feeling lonely. Yes to new books, new recipes, new songs. She even signed up for a weekend workshop at the local community center. Journaling for renewal, the flyer had said. Something about it called to her. When she walked in that Saturday morning, she didn't expect to recognize herself in the faces of strangers. But she did. There were women of all ages sitting in folding chairs, eyes soft, hearts raw. When the instructor asked, "Why are you here?" Clara's answer came from someplace deep. "Because I stayed so long in someone else's life," she said, "that I forgot how to live my own." No one clapped, no one gasped, they just nodded. Quietly, because they understood. Healing didn't make her forget what had happened. It made her remember who she was before it did. She began to reclaim old joys. Her love for plants, she bought 3 and named them Hope, Grace, and Patience. Her joy in cooking just for the joy of it, she made cinnamon bread one Sunday morning, filling the house with warmth. Even Rose noticed. "You're glowing again," she said, sipping her tea. Clara smiled. "I think I'm coming home to myself." Ethan, too, noticed, but he didn't dare say it out loud. He simply watched her from a quiet distance. He had never seen her like this, not even when they first met. She was no longer living for someone else's rhythm. She had found her own. He helped more with the children now, not out of guilt, not because she asked, but because he wanted to do better. And Clara didn't praise him for it. She let him figure it out for himself. She had no interest in managing his change. That was his work to do. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Ethan paused beside her. "I've been thinking," he said. She glanced at him. "About? I thought I knew what love was, but I think I only knew how to be wanted, not how to give back." She said nothing, just kept drying the plates. He continued, voice lower. "I don't expect anything from you. I know I've lost the right, but I'm trying to become someone our kids can be proud of." That made her pause. She looked up at him and said, "Then don't try for me, try for them. And try for yourself." That night, Clara sat in her room and opened her notebook again. She wrote, "Forgiveness is not for the one who broke you, it's for the one inside you who needs to breathe again." She closed the book and exhaled. It was starting to feel like peace. The first time Clara laughed without guilt, it caught her off guard. She was sitting on a park bench, watching Lily and Miles chase bubbles in the air, sunlight warming their cheeks. Another mother nearby had shared a silly story about her son hiding cookies under his pillow. Clara laughed, an honest, open, belly-deep laugh. It felt new, strange, like her lungs had to remember how to expand that way again. Later that day, she sat at her desk and wrote, "I laughed today, and I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation." It was a small moment, but small things she was learning were never really small. She began saying yes to invitations she once declined. Coffee with Maya, an old friend from college, a community book circle at the library, a pottery class every other Friday night. And for the first time in years, Clara had nights that belonged only to her. She'd walk home after class, fingers dusted with clay, hair pulled back in a bun, feeling quiet and full. Her hands, once so busy with serving, now shaped soft bowls, uneven and imperfect, just like her life. One evening after class, Maya offered to walk her home. "It's good to see you again," Maya said as they passed under the amber streetlights. Clara smiled. "It's good to be seen." They paused outside Clara's gate. Maya turned to her gently. "You seem different." "I am," Clara said without hesitation. "But also, I think I'm just finally being who I was before I forgot." Maya didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Some women understand each other in silences more than in stories. Inside the house, the kids were already asleep. Rose was in her room, reading. Ethan was folding laundry. It startled Clara to see him doing it quietly, not for show. "I put the plants on the windowsill so they get more light," he said softly. She nodded. "Thank you." He folded another shirt. "Lily said you made them popcorn and let them watch cartoons in bed." She asked nicely. He shrugged. "And it was Friday." Clara smiled faintly. "They'll remember things like that." He looked at her then, not with expectation, but with respect. "Clara, I don't know where we're headed. I just know I want to show up better wherever we go." She appreciated the honesty, but she didn't offer reassurance. Her journey wasn't about returning to the past, it was about becoming someone who didn't need to. That night, she didn't write about Ethan. She wrote about herself. "I'm no longer surviving days, I'm shaping them. Like clay in my hands." In the mornings, Clara started waking up earlier, not because she had to, but because she wanted to be alone with the quiet. She'd sit by the garden and sip tea, watching the sky change color slowly. That quiet used to be filled with sadness. Now it felt like her sanctuary. The children noticed the change too. "Mom," Lily said one day as they walked home from school, "you smile more now." Clara squeezed her hand gently. "Do you like that?" "I do. You look like you have a secret." Clara laughed. "Maybe I do." "What is it?" Clara knelt beside her daughter and whispered, "The secret is I'm happy being me." Lily tilted her head. "I want to have that secret too." "You will," Clara said, brushing her hair back. "One day you'll learn how." The weeks passed. Clara didn't make any big announcements. She didn't change cities or burn old photos. She simply continued. Growing, reclaiming, becoming, Ethan remained present in the children's lives. He helped with homework, started cooking on weekends, and even took over Saturday drop-offs for Lily's dance class. But Clara no longer waited for his change. She no longer made space for him in the center of her world. She had found something stronger than reconciliation. She had found her own rhythm. On a sunny afternoon, Clara hosted a small gathering in the backyard, just her pottery friends, a few moms from the school, and Maya. There was soft music, mismatched chairs, and homemade lemonade. Someone asked, "What do you do, Clara?" She thought for a moment. "I'm a mother, I'm learning pottery, I write sometimes, and mostly I try to live honestly." It was the simplest answer, but in her voice there was depth, history, and healing. Later, when everyone left, Maya hugged her tightly. "You're glowing." "I feel light," Clara said, "not because life is easy, but because I stopped carrying things that weren't mine." And that was the truth. She no longer carried the guilt of Ethan's betrayal. She no longer carried the burden of keeping everyone happy at the cost of her own joy. She no longer waited for someone to choose her, because she had already chosen herself. In her notebook that night, she wrote one last thing. "I used to believe that being loved meant being needed. Now I know real love begins when you are no longer afraid to stand alone." She closed the book and exhaled. It was enough. She was enough. Spring came early that year. The trees outside Clara's window were already budding green, and the light had softened into something almost golden. It reminded her of the year she and Ethan first moved into the house, when everything still felt untouched, open, new. But that was another lifetime. Clara had changed, not dramatically, quietly, fully. One afternoon, Rose entered Clara's room holding a folded letter. "It's from Ethan," she said softly, placing it on the table. He didn't want to say it out loud. Clara didn't reach for it immediately. She thanked Rose, made herself tea, and sat by the window. She let the birdsong finish, let the sun stretch longer into the room. Only then did she unfold the paper. The letter was written in Ethan's handwriting, slightly uneven at the edges, as if written slowly, word by careful word. He didn't ask for anything, not forgiveness, not return, not closeness. He simply wrote, "You gave me everything, and I treated your love like a safety net, not a gift. That was my failure, not yours. You taught me how to be still, how to show up. And though I may never deserve another place in your heart, I'm grateful you helped me grow mine. I see you now, truly, and even if from a distance, I will honor the woman you are becoming." She read it twice, folded it back, and placed it in her drawer, not to forget, but to remember that even broken things can end with dignity. That weekend, the kids had a school celebration. Ethan was there, camera in hand, smiling genuinely as Lily performed a small poetry recital. Miles waved from the crowd, face painted like a lion. They looked like a family again, but not the way they used to. After the event, Ethan approached Clara outside the school. There were no crowds, no noise, just them under a tree blooming quietly above them. "I wanted to thank you," he said. Clara nodded. "For what?" "For not turning bitter." She looked at him steadily. "Bitterness is a weight. I had to set it down." He studied her a moment longer. "I still don't know what our story becomes from here." Clara exhaled. "Maybe it doesn't need to become anything. Maybe it just is." "And what about us?" She paused. "Not with pain, with certainty. I'll always respect you as the father of our children, but I don't owe you a return. I gave you the best of me once. That part is complete." He nodded slowly, respectfully. "You're incredible, Clara." "I always was," she replied. That evening, she sat with Lily and Miles under a warm blanket on the couch, reading aloud from a storybook, her voice smooth, calm. Ethan sat across the room, sipping tea quietly, not as a husband, not even quite as a friend, just present. There was peace in that. Not every wound ends in reunion. Not every healing needs a new beginning. Sometimes the greatest closure is living well, living whole. Weeks passed. The letter stayed in Clara's drawer untouched, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't need it to remind her of who she was anymore. She had kept a promise to herself not to let anyone dim her light again. She still wrote in her journal. She still molded clay with her hands. She still woke up early just to hear the silence. And then one morning she packed a small bag. She told Rose and the children she'd be gone for the weekend. "Where are you going, Mom?" Miles asked. Clara smiled. "Somewhere peaceful, somewhere that reminds me I belong to myself." She drove to a quiet coastal town and stayed in a small cottage with white sheets and the sound of waves outside her window. She walked along the shoreline barefoot. Let the sea kiss her toes. Let the salt air remind her that she had weathered the storm and was still standing. One evening, she lit a single candle, opened her journal, and wrote, "I used to believe endings were painful. Now I know they can be beautiful too when they return you to yourself." She closed the notebook, sat still, she didn't cry, she didn't ache, she simply was, and that was everything. Because healing doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just you breathing again, choosing peace, walking forward alone, but never lonely. Clara didn't need a new love to feel whole. She had found something stronger than romance. She had found her own grace, and it would never leave her again. The story didn't end with a grand return. It ended with a quiet becoming, and that, in its own way, was the most powerful love story of all.